It started with a tiny detail I almost ignored, the kind of thing you dismiss because it sounds too ridiculous to be real. A faint hum late at night. A subtle spike on my monthly power bill. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make me pause and think, that's odd. I live in a quiet, tightly packed neighborhood where houses sit close enough that you can hear a garage door 3 doors down. We all share fences, sidewalks, and apparently some people think we share utilities too. My wife was the first one to notice the cable. One evening, she stepped outside to take the trash out and came back in with a confused look on her face. She asked me why there was an extension cord running along the side of our house, tucked low against the fence like it was trying not to be seen. I followed her out and felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one you get when someone has crossed a boundary without asking. The cord ran from our exterior outlet, through a small gap in the fence, and disappeared next door, straight into our neighbor's garage. The Tesla owner. Everyone on the block knew her. Always dressed sharp, always talking loud, always reminding people how eco-conscious she was while lecturing others about noise, trash cans, and lawn height. She had complained about my barbecue smoke once, even though she ran her car charger every night like a small power plant. At least I thought she did, until that moment. I unplugged the cord and waited. Within minutes, her garage door flew open. She marched over like she'd been personally offended by the laws of physics. No hello. No explanation. Just straight to accusation. She said her car had stopped charging and demanded to know if I had touched her equipment. I held up the cord and asked why it was plugged into my outlet. She didn't deny it. She just shrugged and said her charger was acting weird and this was temporary. Temporary, apparently, meant 3 weeks. That's when I checked the footage from our side camera. Night after night, same routine. She waited until after dark, slipped the cord back through the fence, and plugged into my grid like it was community property. No permission. No heads up. Just entitlement wrapped in confidence. I confronted her the next morning, calmly. I told her she needed to stop immediately. She laughed, actually laughed, and said I was being dramatic over a little electricity. That's when the HOA entered the chat. Instead of backing off, she filed a complaint against me. Claimed I was harassing her. Claimed my outdoor outlet was unsafe and that I was interfering with her vehicle. The HOA sent a warning notice about neighbor disputes and suggested mediation. Not enforcement against theft. Mediation. That told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to go. I tried one more time to be reasonable. I put it in writing. Clear. Polite. No charging for my property. No exceptions. I even installed a lockable outlet cover, thinking that would end it. For 2 nights it did. On the 3rd night, the lock was gone. Snapped clean off. The cord was back. Charging lights glowing happily in her garage while my meter spun like a roulette wheel. That wasn't entitlement anymore. That was deliberate. Calculated. And it flipped a switch in my mind. See, people like her assume politeness is weakness. They think rules only apply to others and consequences are optional if you complain loudly enough. She thought the worst thing that could happen was another passive HOA email. She was wrong. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her again. I didn't touch her car. Instead, I sat down, reviewed my footage, my bills, my property lines, and the HOA bylaws. I documented everything. Dates, times, costs, evidence stacked neatly in a folder. And then I came up with the pettiest, most perfectly legal revenge imaginable. One that didn't damage her Tesla at all, but absolutely destroyed her sense of entitlement. The next morning, I didn't storm next door. I didn't send another message. I didn't even mention the broken lock. Instead, I did something far more effective. I stopped reacting and started preparing. People like her thrive on confrontation. They feed on drama, on raised voices, on feeling important. The fastest way to unbalance them is silence, paired with paperwork. I called my utility provider first. Not to complain, not to accuse, just to ask questions. Very specific ones. About unauthorized power draw. About liability if someone else uses your outlet. About what happens when a third party causes a surge or damage through an exterior connection. The representative didn't sound surprised. Apparently, this wasn't rare. She emailed me documentation outlining responsibility, theft thresholds, and reimbursement processes. I thanked her and added it to the folder. Next, I reviewed the HOA bylaws line by line. Buried deep in the section everyone ignores was a clause about unauthorized use of another resident's utilities. Funny how selective enforcement works. I highlighted it, printed it, and added screenshots of the footage showing the cord crossing the property line. Dates. Times. Clear visuals. No commentary. Evidence doesn't need emotion. That evening, right on schedule, the cord appeared again. I watched from the kitchen as the charging lights blinked on in her garage, confident and smug. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. That told me she felt protected by the HOA, by noise, by the assumption that no one would actually do anything. I let it charge. All night. I wanted a full record. The meter readings the next morning confirmed it. Another spike. Logged. Documented. Instead of confronting her, I sent a formal notice. Certified mail. Calm language. No accusations. Just facts. Unauthorized use of my electrical outlet. Attached evidence. Attached HOA clause. A request to cease immediately and reimburse costs to date. I copied the HOA board and the property management company. Suddenly, the issue wasn't personal anymore. It was administrative. Paper trails make people nervous. Her response came fast and loud. She sent a rambling email accusing me of targeting her, of hating electric vehicles, of trying to sabotage her lifestyle. She claimed the outlet was too close to the fence to be clearly private. She demanded the HOA intervene and threatened to report me for harassment. The board replied with their usual tone, "Let's all be neighbors, let's mediate, let's avoid escalation." Still no denial of the theft. Interesting. That's when I moved to step 2. I scheduled a licensed electrician to inspect the outlet. He documented the broken lock, the repeated unauthorized access, and the risk of damage. He wrote it all up professionally with his license number at the top. I paid him happily. That invoice went into the folder too. Then I did the simplest thing of all. I disconnected the outlet from my grid entirely. No confrontation. No warning. Just compliance with safety recommendations. Perfectly legal. Perfectly boring. When she plugged in that night, nothing happened. No charge. No lights. No power. Just a very expensive car doing absolutely nothing. Within minutes, my doorbell rang. She wasn't smiling anymore. Because now, the power she thought she had was gone, and every move she made next only made things worse for her. And that's when the real petty revenge began. She stood on my porch like she owned it. Hands on her hips. Jaw tight. Phone already in her hand. Camera angled just enough to feel like a threat. She didn't knock, just pressed the doorbell and kept her finger there until I answered. The moment I opened the door, she launched into it. No greeting. No question. Just accusation. She demanded to know why her car wasn't charging and why I had interfered with shared infrastructure. I let her talk. People reveal everything when you don't interrupt them. I calmly told her the outlet had been disconnected for safety reasons, based on a licensed electrician's recommendation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't justify myself beyond that. Her face shifted from anger to disbelief. She said I had no right. I told her it was my outlet, on my property connected to my grid. She laughed again, but this time it sounded thinner. She said the HOA would deal with me. I nodded and said they already were, via email. That's when she made her second big mistake. She plugged her phone directly in my face and announced she was recording because I was admitting to sabotage. I smiled and told her she was welcome to record, but she should probably include the part where she admitted to using my electricity without permission for weeks. Her eyes flicked away for half a second. That was all I needed. She turned the camera off and stormed back toward her house, muttering about lawyers and consequences. The HOA meeting was scheduled for that Friday. I came prepared. Printed documentation, video stills, utility statements, the electrician's report, the certified letter receipt. I didn't bring emotion. I brought receipts. She showed up late, visibly annoyed, Tesla key card dangling like a badge of honor. When it was her turn to speak, she claimed I was retaliating against her for being environmentally responsible. She said I was hostile, aggressive, unneighborly. She never denied plugging in. When my turn came, I laid everything out calmly. Timeline, evidence, costs, bylaws. The room shifted. Board members stopped nodding at her and started flipping pages. One asked why the lock was broken. Another asked why the outlet crossed property lines. The property manager asked if there was proof. I played the footage. No commentary. Just her, night after night, plugging in like it was nothing. Silence does incredible things. The HOA couldn't ignore it anymore. They issued a formal notice against her for unauthorized utility use and property damage. They ordered reimbursement. They warned of fines if it happened again. She exploded. Said the board was biased. Said this wouldn't be the end. Stormed out halfway through the meeting. I stayed seated, said thank you, and packed up my folder. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The following week, she parked her Tesla directly against a fence line, as close to my outlet as physically possible. No cord. No plug. Just there. A statement. Passive-aggressive, but still legal. I ignored it. 2 days later, she left a note in my mailbox demanding I restore access, or she would pursue damages. I photographed it and added it to the folder. Then came the real turning point. I received a notice from the utility company informing me that a report had been filed claiming my electrical setup was unsafe and non-compliant. Anonymous, of course. Inspection scheduled. I smiled when I read it, because now she'd crossed from petty to provable. The inspector came, checked everything, passed it with no issues, noted the previous tampering, asked if I wanted to file a theft report. I said yes. That single word did more damage to her sense of power than anything else I'd done. Because now it wasn't neighbor versus neighbor. It was record versus record. And hers was about to collapse. Once the theft report was filed, everything moved faster and quieter. That's the part people don't expect. They think consequences come with shouting and spectacle, but real ones arrive in envelopes and official language. A utility investigator contacted me first. Calm. Professional. He asked for documentation. I sent the folder. All of it. Footage timestamps, billing comparisons, the electrician's report, the broken lock, the HOA correspondence. There was a pause on the line when he reached the videos. Not disbelief, recognition. He'd seen this before. The next contact was from the HOA's legal counsel. The tone was very different this time. No, let's all be neighbors. No mediation language. Just careful wording and distance. They informed me that the HOA would not be representing the neighbor in any matters related to utility theft or property damage. They also reminded me, politely, that any further harassment should be reported directly to local authorities. Translation: she's on her own now. That's when her behavior changed. The Tesla stopped appearing near the fence. The passive-aggressive note stopped. The glares from across the driveway disappeared. For a few days, it was quiet enough that I almost thought she'd learned something. Then I received a certified letter from her attorney. It accused me of malicious interference with personal property and demanded compensation for charging inconvenience and emotional distress. I forwarded it to my attorney without comment. 2 days later, her attorney withdrew. Apparently, once they reviewed the evidence and the active utility investigation, they decided this wasn't the hill to die on. That's the thing about petty people. They escalate emotionally, not strategically. They assume bluster replaces leverage. It doesn't. The utility company concluded its investigation the following week. Unauthorized usage confirmed. Estimated consumption calculated. Damages assessed. They issued a formal theft notice in her name and credited my account for the stolen power. They also flagged her address for future monitoring. That alone was devastating to her image. The woman who lectured everyone about responsibility was now officially documented for stealing electricity. But the real blow came from the HOA. In an emergency meeting, one I didn't even need to attend, The board fined her for bylaw violations, property damage, and misuse of utilities. They mandated reimbursement. They warned that any retaliation would result in further penalties. And because HOA politics are what they are, they quietly amended enforcement procedures to prevent anything like this from happening again. She lost her leverage overnight. Neighbors stopped indulging her complaints. The board stopped responding to her emails. The management company redirected her calls to voicemail. When people like that lose their audience, they unravel privately. I heard later that she tried charging from another neighbor's outlet and was shut down immediately. Funny how word spreads. One evening, as I was locking up the garage, she walked past me. No speech. No glare. Just a stiff nod and averted eyes. It wasn't an apology, but it was surrender. That was enough. I never wanted humiliation. I wanted boundaries respected. The Tesla still sat in her driveway, pristine and silent, charging only from her own grid now. No cords crossing fences. No entitlement disguised as convenience. Just reality. People sometimes ask if it was worth the effort. The documentation. The restraint. The waiting. It was. Because petty revenge isn't about destruction. It's about exposure. About letting someone's own behavior become the weapon that undoes them. And the best part? I never raised my voice. Never touched her car. Never broke a rule. I just stopped letting her break mine. By the time it was over, nothing of hers was destroyed, except the illusion that she could take what wasn't hers and face no consequences. And that illusion? It never came back. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm, quieter, sharper, more aware. Not tense, just different. People locked their gates again. They checked their meters. They paid closer attention to what belonged to whom. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Entitlement had lost its invisibility cloak. The HOA sent out a general notice reminding residents that all utilities were private unless explicitly shared in writing. No names mentioned. No finger-pointing. But everyone knew exactly why it had been sent. A few neighbors stopped me during walks and thanked me quietly. One admitted he'd once let her plug in just for a night and never got reimbursed. Another said he'd been afraid to say no because she always threatened complaints. Hearing that confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't about electricity. It was about control. As for her, she changed. Not dramatically. No public apology. No dramatic exit. Just a steady shrinking of presence. Fewer comments at meetings. No more lectures in the group chat. The Tesla still gleamed in her driveway, but now it charged the old-fashioned way, on her own dime. Sometimes I'd see her double-checking her own outlets, cautious now, careful. Consequences have a way of teaching lessons that words never do. The theft report closed officially with a final notice from the utility company. Case resolved. Credit applied. Monitoring active. That document went into the folder too, not because I needed it anymore, but because I'd learned something important through all of this. Boundaries only matter if you're willing to defend them calmly and completely. Yelling doesn't do that. Revenge doesn't either. Documentation does. Life moved on. Bills normalized. Nights got quieter. The faint hum that started everything never returned. And in its absence, there was something else. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on avoiding conflict, but the solid kind that comes from knowing where the lines are and that they'll be respected. Every now and then, I catch her glance when she thinks I'm not looking. There's no anger in it anymore. Just calculation. Awareness. She knows now that politeness doesn't equal permission, and silence doesn't equal consent. She learned that the hard way, but legally, cleanly, and without anyone touching a thing. People ask if I regret not confronting her more aggressively. I don't. The goal was never to embarrass her or damage her property. The goal was to stop the behavior and make sure it didn't happen again, to me or anyone else. That goal was met. Petty revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be destructive. And it definitely doesn't have to be illegal. Sometimes, the most satisfying outcome is watching someone realize, slowly, undeniably, that the rules they ignored apply to them too. In the end, her Tesla wasn't destroyed. But her sense of entitlement? that didn't survive the charge.